just one of the hot topics this week has been changes to FPL. We touch on them a fair bit, actually, on these shows. There's FPL Salah, he posted, he got kind of 1,000 likes on Twitter, because FPL did a feedback form. You had to have marketing preferences set to on to receive the feedback form, which meant a lot of people didn't. But yeah, some of the questions in it were quite interesting. It's no indication they're going to implement everything that they've said they're going to do, but there were some quite interesting things on there. Some of the things FPL Salah raised were replacing the bench boost chip, which seems to be pretty popular. People aren't a big fan of that. I made the joke they should bring in some kind of chip to allow you to play an extra forward rather than a defender. And then someone else said, wouldn't it be better to do like a false 9 chip? I mean, you can play no forwards. And I love that. Yes, because that's what we need at the moment.
Would. Yes.
Yeah. False 9 chip. There you go. There's an idea for you. Price changes. I thought this was interesting as well. He suggested price changes after deadline. Yeah, and Focal did a really cool little graphic, little mock-up that he did, which was around transparency of price changes as well. So a kind of idea of you go on the FPL site and you can kind of see who's going to be going up and who isn't. I know that's one of the calls that people want to see is a bit more transparency, but then that locks FPL out of kind of freezing prices and the kind of the bit of jiggery pokery that goes on behind the scenes that isn't always clear.
Which I have no evidence of that, but I think originally that was the idea behind it, as in they wanted to have the freedom to kind of correct things if things were going a bit wild. I don't know if they've done that for years though, because I mean nowadays it's tracked so much by the community. If that happened, we'd be all over it, wouldn't we? We'd be like, oh, what's happened here? There's been a few every season. It's like, oh, why did he go down when he wasn't meant to? But nothing really wild. So I don't know actually if that's a thing anymore. So this could be possible, right? So just to be clear, did Salah suggest these things, or were these things that he saw the Premier League were asking about?
Yeah, I mean the feedback form for the Premier League was very comprehensive in terms of lots of different things they could bring in. I believe that I think this is kind of a combination. I don't think they actually said, should we replace the bench boost chip? But they said something like, how important are chips to you, or changing the chips and that kind of thing. So I imagine it's kind of a combination of both. But the big one that I just wanted to mention here was the one that kind of got the community talking the most, was captains, twisting on captains. Because the community is very divided on the captains. Some people want to see it binned off completely. Other people kind of like how it is. Some people want to see similar to like what Gaffer does, or what the Champman does, which is and Phantom,
or European games.
Which is captain points and then 1.5 times for your vice captain. Alternatively, get rid of the vice captain altogether. I don't know. There's lots of different ways they go with it, but twisting on captains, because they did that with Ultimate FPL, didn't they? A few years ago, they brought in that paid for game. And you could change your captains like you do in the Sky game. I hate that idea personally. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they'd have to do it so you could front load your decisions as well. It's like, so they'd have to have some method, like, if Salah gets less than 10 points, then switch it to De Bruyne for Sunday and that kind. Because otherwise you've got to be on it all weekend, haven't you? You can't just get past deadline and forget about it.
So you're saying it's like an automatic thing that would just do it?
Yeah. Well, so basically you go, if my captain blanks, move it to the vice captain, or move it to choice 2. If my captain scores less than 5 points, move it to my. So you can set it. So you can set rules, maybe for the whole season or maybe for that particular game week, and that way you can do it all in one sitting. You haven't got to go back to it. Obviously, you've got the choice to override it if you can turn up on a Sunday morning and you're not at the garden centre and you can change it, but. You need that ability to set and forget, I think, which is what we've got now, which would defeat the kind of skepticism about it, because people are quite rightly saying, "Oh God, that'll be more decisions to make, and it'll be more work over the weekend, and we can't just forget about it." Well, you can if they have that kind of system. So I think that's what they'd have to do, and I think that would be all right. I quite like the idea. I mean, it's a bit more strategy. I think it won't help the casual player, though, will it? I don't think. Do you think it?
Well, it's interesting because I'm playing fan team this season. I'm treating that as a kind of like side game, and I probably treat fan team how a lot of people treat FPL, which is a much more of a casual approach to it. Like I leave it till really late, don't really think about it, make my moves kind of last minute, and I've missed deadlines. I've had my captain, or talk about Che Adams. I've had my captain on Che Adams for 3 weeks. How has that even happened? How is that even possible? But it's happened, and that must happen to people in FPL. And I worry that it just adds more opportunity to get stressed and frustrated with the game and bin it off. So I mean, I just can't see any way in which FPL would.
Well, but
implement
what
it.
I'm saying is, if they had a position where you went, okay, if my captain scores less than 2, move it to my vice captain if he plays Sunday, then you get around that, right? So that would help the casual player, because then they don't have to think about changing their captain, because they know that if they do badly on Saturday, they've got a.
But then you'd have to. That means you're asking the casual players to make sure they're checking which fixtures on which days.
Yeah.
To make sure the vice captain is on the net. That's a lot
exactly. Yeah, but you're expecting the casual player to check in once, aren't you?
Yeah, I suppose.
All I'm saying is that method would mean that the casual player wouldn't have to check in every day of the weekend, or every match day. But yeah, I mean, if you don't want the casual player, or maybe you can do it so that, well, yeah, it's difficult. I mean, you're not going to. I mean, I guess you know that the Europa League teams are going to play on the Sunday, right? So you can, to some extent, set it up.
I think it's for me, it feels like too much. Let alone for like someone who's just going. Praz had an interesting one, which was on. His suggestion was on Cameo Appearances, which is if your player plays less than 20 minutes, you can set it to automatically sub them out. And again, like, not to keep talking about Phantom, but Phantom have the safety net on some of their games, which means that you have a player in, and then if they don't play, you get the next player come into your side straight away. So even if they play 20 minutes, you get this other player coming on. So that would be, because that would make players like Jota and Diaz more interesting, right? Because if they did only play 10-15 minutes, you know that you're going to get another player off your bench. So
I mean, I think, as I said at Fest, I think the only changes they're going to do is if they look at the changes and go, does this help the new player? Does this make it more likely the new player stays in the game? This is the way it's got to be going, I would imagine. It's the way video games are going, right? It's like, it's all about live service. It's all about, what are our players doing? When are our players leaving the game? Why are they leaving the game? What was it that made them leave the game? What can we do to bring them back in? Did that work? No, that didn't work. We'll try this. Did that work? Yes, it did. Right, we'll do more of that. That's what video games do, right? And I think that's what Premier League might do. It's like, the way video games work is it's events now, right? So you buy a game, and then a game will do live events. So like in week 2, it'll be double XP or something like that. I don't want FPL to go this way, but they could do something like crazy like that, where they go, okay, week 10, randomly, all headed goals are worth double points, or something silly like that. Those are the kind of things that video games do to keep players interested, because it means that there are like random live events throughout the season that would mean that there's things to keep you interested. Now, I don't think they'll do that, but something like that. They've got to be looking at the data behind the game and going, when players drop out, are these players that are, 300 points the average score, and therefore it's the fact they're losing that's making them drop out? Have they played their chips when they drop out? So is the chips not doing the purpose, which should be to keep them in? And I think that's what they need to go with. They need to look at the data, see what the problem is, and make changes that address that. Which is why I suggested like doing the splitting the chips in 2 halves.
That is so obvious to me.
It's obvious. They do it with the wild card.
Yeah.
They do it with the wild card. Get rid of the bench boost. Narrow it down to the free hit, triple captain, and the wild card. Give us one set in the first half, 1 to 18, that you've got to use. You can't carry them over. And a second set after that. Yeah. And then that way, when the casual player plays their chips early, they still get a second set when the double game week talk starts. Because the double game week talk doesn't start till Christmas. So even if they're in the community a little bit, they're not going to pick up on the fact they should be saving the chips until, Christmas time? Then they might pick something up, they'll see an article on FPL or whatever. But the FPL don't do articles at the start of the season saying, whatever you do, don't use your chips yet. They're not going to say that, are they? Because it's kind of like, well, why have you given me this chip if I can't use it for weeks? It's like silly, isn't it? So it's an easy fix, that. Why wouldn't you do that?
I know.
It's
going to be really interesting talking to Henry. After the season ends, we'll get Henry back involved, because he's dropped off completely. He's barely making transfers. His interest has waned. He
did well this week.
He did, but he hadn't made. I think he burnt a transfer. He didn't use. I think this is like the 3rd week he hasn't used one, but he had Son, so he did well. But I imagine a lot of that's tied into the chip use that he had, because he used them all early and then didn't do it. To me, my 2 changes, like I drum on all these streams, is the chips first and second half, and bringing more players into the game, but doing it in a way which doesn't overly complicate the rules.
Bringing more players into the game. What do you mean by that?
So this is what I was saying about the kind of in-house classification. So defensive mid. attacking mid and change the scoring system based on who they are, just to bring in players, and also nerf, to use a gaming term, players like Salah and Son being in midfield, because it's just a bit ridiculous.
I mean, I agree with that, but I don't think they're going to do that because it complicates it. And the other thing that I'm proposing is roll in more than one transfer, so it's more forgivable
like
if you miss the deadline. Because if a casual player misses the deadline, you know, they're often punished, right? You feel like, oh, well, that's it. I'm not. If you get an extra transfer more often than not, at least you've got something to go. Oh, okay, you missed the deadline, but you've got 2 transfers next week, or 3 the week after.
Completely agree. Yeah,
and that helps. That helps the new player, but it also gives us something else to play for, like, because there's strategy then for us to go, oh, actually, if I don't make that kind of vanity transfer, I could have 3 the week after, and that could really help because I can play a -4, make 4 changes. You know, these aren't like massive rule changes that you've got to explain that take a whole list of new rules. They're just, you know, you can roll 2 transfers instead of 1, and we're giving you, like we used to give you the wild card, we're now giving you 2 other chips that you use in the first half and use in the second.
That's exactly it.
Simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
Simple rule changes that help new players and give us a little bit extra. I think that's what they should do, but I don't know. I don't have a voice anymore. They don't come to me anymore. You know, I will email them and go, look, there's a lot of chatter in the community about it. You ought to dip in and have a look at some of the threads, because they should. They really should.
Give me my consultancy fee.
There's a lot of really good ideas. Yeah, I don't get that anymore either. No.
Excellent. No, I mean, I really enjoy seeing discussion. It's really interesting because so many people have different views, right? It's people suggest an idea, and obviously they think it's a really good idea, and they get absolutely flamed for it. And there's such a diversity. It is just about keeping it simple. But I think obviously the Premier League are going to prioritise the casual player, bringing people in, so things can't change.